So this is the ninth session on the topic music through MATLAB, and we are going to talk about melodies in this particular session. All right, so let us start. So what is a melody? The simple answer to that is that melody is a series of musical phrases. When we say that, the natural question that arises is, what is a musical phrase? So let us answer that. A musical phrase is a logical sequence of notes. So it's a sequence of notes, but not any random sequence. It has to be logical. What is the meaning of this logical? We'll say in a moment. But before that, let us see that what is the typical duration of a musical phrase. So the duration is typically 1 or 2 cycles. In Indian rhythm terms, it may be 1 cycle of teen tal, or it may be 2 cycles of kairwa, or it may be 2 cycles of dadra, and so on. If you talk in terms of Western notation, then the phrase may occupy 4 measures, or its duration may be that of 8 measures, and so on. So these are the typical durations. It could be, the number could be more also. All right. Let us now answer what do we mean by the logical sequence of notes. So logical sequence means it creates a melody which sounds good to the ear. It evokes some emotions. So that is the meaning of this term logical. Next, let us try to see how the melodies are composed. When musicians compose melodies, the process is largely a creative process. One cannot explain this, and one cannot teach it also. It is something which takes birth in the mind of the musician. He hums it to himself, he tries it on piano, and so on. But what we can do is, we can study the parameters which the composers often use. These parameters we can study. One thing we should understand is that these techniques that we are going to study through these parameters are not cast in stone. A gifted musician can do something different and still achieve the similar effect. However, let us study these parameters. First of all, look at tempo. If tempo is slow, then it will give a soothing feeling, a serious feeling. If the tempo is fast, it will give rise to happy feelings, energetic, playful, and so on. If it's a medium tempo, it could go either way. So that is about the feelings which are generated by tempo. Then the other thing that affects the mood is note type. So if you use Shuddha notes, Shuddha swars, or natural notes in Western terms, it gives rise to happy feelings. But if you use Komal notes, then it tends to give rise to sad emotions or serious feelings. Then you have rhythmic patterns, which we have studied in the last couple of sessions. And in this session, we are going to concentrate on the pitch patterns as well. And what is the pitch pattern? How the pitch changes as the melody progresses. Remember, every note has a certain frequency. So as you go through the melody, the frequency keeps on changing, which means the pitch keeps on changing. That is because you are using different notes. All right. Let us now, there are a number of pitch contours possible, or number of pitch patterns as we can call them. They are possible. But the one we are going to study in this session is called as an arc type of contour. So in this case, the highest note comes somewhere near the midway point of the phrase. That means the initial part of the phrase is ascending. It ascends, it goes on increasing, reaches a peak frequency, and then it starts decreasing. Now, this arc kind of pattern creates a short story, that of a question answer. As the pitch is increasing, it is like asking a question. You must have noticed that whenever, even when we are conversing, when we ask a question, our pitch tends to go up. Where are you going? That's how we say it. And the answer comes downward. She says, I'm going home. So that's why the emotions which are created by the arc kind of pattern is akin to question answer session, or in some other context you can consider it as tension release. As the pitch increases, it builds the tension. You reach the peak and then resolve the tension by going down in a smooth fashion. In some other context, you can call it as expectation and resolution. As the pitch builds up, there could be a leap that you take suddenly, increase the frequency by quite a bit. That leap will generate some expectation, and again it is resolved by going down smoothly. All right, so that is arc. Let us now see an example of an arc. Now in this case, I am not going through the explanation of the complete program, because in our previous programs we have already seen how to generate the various notes. So this is one example of a arc kind of phrase, musical phrase. And if you look at this, this is one cycle of teen tal. So you got 4 khands, or in Western terms you can call it as 4/4 rhythm. So if you look at the first measure, the duration will be that of 4 quarter notes or 4 matras. So look at the first note, it is pancham, which is having 1 matra, there is no suffix, so it is 1 matra. Second one is half matra, third one is half, so 1 plus half, that makes it 2. D is again 1 matra, and this is again followed by 2 half matras. So this complete sequence of 6 notes occupies a duration of 4 matras. Similarly, the second measure, this is 1 matra, these two together is 1 more matra, and now you have got nishad of 2 matras. So this also corresponds to 4 matras. Third and fourth measure are somewhat similar in the sense that each of them consists of 4 notes, having each note having 1 matra. So S, T, N, D, N, P, G, R, S. Okay. What about the arc nature? You can see it starts from pancham. It increases. It doesn't increase monotonically, because otherwise it will be boring. So occasionally it will go down, come up again, go down, come up again. But the overall slope is ascending. And ultimately you reach the upper shadaj. After reaching the upper shadaj, then it comes down smoothly and hits the middle octave shadaj, madhya saptak shadaj. Alright, we can see this better if we look at the pitch and the rhythmic pattern. You can see here 1 matra, half matra, half matra, 1 matra, half and half. So this entire sequence consists of the first khand, first measure. Then this is 1 followed by half, and then followed by 2 matra. That is the second measure here. Third measure is 4 notes of 1 matra each. Fourth is also similar. Now one more aspect you should note about the composition is that the composers will often use repetition and variety, and they will use repetition and variety in their rhythmic patterns as well as in their pitch patterns. For example, look at this. The first measure has the rhythmic pattern like this: 1 matra followed by 2 half matras, followed by 1 matra, again followed by 2 half matras. Now this is repeated to some extent. So in the second measure, 1 followed by 2, but there is some variation now. The last note here is of double duration. And again in the third measure, there is a slight variety in the sense that you have got 4 notes of 1 matra each, and the fourth is also similar. So you can see some kind of repetition and a kind of variety. What about the pitch pattern? You can see, if you look at the overall slope here, the pitch keeps on increasing, hits the maximum and comes down smoothly. So this is where the question is asked, and this is where it is answered. But in between, you can have small patterns themselves. For example, if you look at the first measure here, it's a small inverted arc, again followed by an inverted arc. In the second measure, again this goes down first and then comes up. So it's sort of descending and then ascending. And of course in the third and fourth measure, this is smoothly coming down, except that you have got an increase of pitch at this particular point, a little variety. Another technique you should note about the composition is that you have got what is called as a leap and a stepwise movement. Stepwise movement means it's a smooth movement. You go from one note to the next note, either up or down. So from here you go from Pancham to Madhyam, again from Madhyam to Pancham, from Pancham to Dhaivat. So you are uh, going up or down by one note only. But if you look at this one, for example, from Pancham you jump to Komal Nishad, which is having two matras. So this is called as a leap. And typically the composers will use a leap in order to generate some kind of tension. So this comes somewhere midway in the arc, generates a tension, and it is resolved by the downward movement here. All right. So much for the theory. Let us now listen to this. Okay, let's play it again, and at the same time I'll show you how the notes are going on the patterns. So let me play that again. All right, so this gives you some idea about how a musical phrase which has a arc kind of pitch pattern, how it is composed. This is just one example. There are very large number of arcs that can be produced. Now there are other kinds of pitch patterns we will study in our next session, but for this session, that's all.